So that's why he starts transitioning into politics.
Yeah.
So in his late 20s and early 30s, his legal career starts really taking off, and he ends up building out an entire law practice. And at this point, the Whigs start to appear. Now, it's important to remember the Whigs are fascinating because when we look at the different political parties that existed throughout the history of the United States, very small percentage of them ever had a president elected. In fact, when we look at political parties, it's really only about four. Four or five. You can get subjective on here because what was John Quincy Adams? He was kind of a national Republican in a sense.
He was kind of his own thing. I mean, wasn't he?
But he was originally elected as a Democratic Republican. So like I think it's weird. Sometimes I see people be like, oh, he was he was more of a national Republican. Well, he didn't win on that ticket. You had the Federalists, right? You had George Washington ran as no party in the first term. Federalists second. John Adams. You have the Democratic Republicans, and then the National Republicans. I would argue never had an elected president. I would, and I think there's a fair argument. Like I wouldn't be like I could see somebody retroactively assigning the title of National Republican to John Quincy Adams, but I think that's only a product of Jacksonianism that occurred after the election. Like literally, it was the election that caused it. So it's weird to like it doesn't make sense to retroactively define it that way.
He didn't run on that particular platform. He just yeah.
Then you have the Whigs. Then we're done. It's Democrats and Republicans since 1860. So the Whigs. The Whig Party starts, percolating. You have all these proto-Whigs walking around. They don't know what they are. Are they National Republicans? Are they not? Because they're not. If you look at the National Republican platform, you look at the Whig platform, you can see why a voter may switch between them. But they're different platforms. They are different platforms. And certainly there was a large wing of the National Republicans that absorbed into the Whigs. I mean, they're literally called the Whigs because they're anti-Jackson. So, I get it. But as Millard Fillmore starts maturing in his political identity, he became very active in local civic affairs. Mm-hmm. He started blurring that line like many attorneys at the time, many of these pre-Civil War attorneys started doing, where they're blurring the line between being an attorney and being a politician. And this is where he gets interesting. This is where he gets really interesting. He starts self-discovering that he's a Whig. And it really comes down to four major points that a lot of historians point to. And this fits Millard Fillmore perfectly. He didn't join the Whig Party because he saw political opportunism and then worked his belief system back. He had a belief system that matched the Whigs. And particularly the four major points were congressional supremacy. He was the support for congressional supremacy, which is literally why the Whigs were formed. Economic development, banking stability, and internal improvements. So, as you could be, literally, you can't be any more anti-Jackson.
I was just going to say. How did he come about to these realizations? Is there any writings on that, or?
I don't know. So there's no writing on him having this eureka moment. They may exist. I just want to be clear. They may exist. I mean, if anybody finds them, let me know. Because I'm really curious. Kyle, you and I, same curiosity.
Yeah.
When I was doing my homework on this, I'm like, it feels like he naturally arrived at these conclusions. And I think part of it was seeing the turmoil of Jackson. Mm-hmm. Because he is so different than Jackson, the way he views stuff. Oh my, it really is. For two attorneys that practiced during the same time in the same country, wow, not even remotely close.
Right, huh.
So he ends up, kind of advanced. He ends up finding the Whigs align with him very well. And during as he's discovering his political feat, he ends up joining the, okay, so the point of clarity here, he participated in the anti-Masonic movement. I don't know if he was a member. I don't believe he was a member.
Like the Freemasons?
Yeah, there was this movement, the anti-Masonic movement, which is basically long story short, but it basically was opposing this the quote-unquote secret society of the Masons, and it heavily emphasized moral reform and transparency. So it was this idea of removing, I don't want to again, I'm not an expert on, my grandfather was a Mason, which is ironic because I was on my mom's side, so her last name's not Mason. And then like my last name's Mason, so that's like
Okay.
that's kind of funny, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
And Masons don't allow Catholics to join, and like so I'm a Mason who can't be a Mason.
Right.
That's funny. I think it's kind of fun. That's a little fun.
Yeah,
a little
I think
fun.
so.
Yeah. But they kind of viewed the Masons as this like aristocratic class. I know that's a bad term. I could probably
Was it like the Illuminati thing, the way people view that
yeah.
today?
I guess if you
it
want to be comical, but yeah, it was this like restrictive it was this restrictive class
was
that
it just a faceless boogeyman that?
yeah, essentially. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Masons now is just like it's like the Elks. It's like a place you go and like have a few beers and have like a social club. But that's not what they viewed it back then. And a lot of the founding fathers were Masons, and it was kind of seen as like, are we forming a new class of aristocrats who joined this Mason movement? So he was very anti it, but his efforts and connections he made in the anti-Masonic network, they basically functioned as a stepping stone into the Whig coalition.
So this is interesting that you mentioned like the anti-Mason, I guess, kind of mentality, or the you mentioned like the classist or the elitism. Like this is something that like Laura and I were talking about. Like we're kind of reading up a little bit, but like I guess the founding fathers didn't really want to, or didn't think they were gonna not have like a wealthy class or an elite class. I think the main thing was just that it should be open to anybody.
That's exactly
not
what it
be, right? Yeah.
Nobody's. I mean that. Yeah, exactly. Because like if you don't think there's going to be a wealthy class, well. You're going to have a homogenous society.
The majority of the people writing the government's rule were from a wealthy class, right? So
they're
going to
because they were educated and could read. Yeah, it's like educated and can read. You're in a period where there's not a lot of education and reading. You're going to be wealthier.
But it's interesting that I guess that so there's a movement against the elite class when really. Like, what are they against, I guess, at that point? Is it just the exclusivity of it or the...
Yes, that's what it was. It was like you have to be part of this club to be elite, as opposed to can you just lift yourselves up to be elite,
right.
which is not a surprise that Millard Fillmore would be against this. He's like the poster child of being anti this.
But, I mean, it's also like the how do you point to him? How is he successful if you have to be part of this club to be successful? Like,
no, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's meritocracy.
Yes.
So... his work in the anti-Masonic network really fueled his entry into the public life, and he would win a congressional seat in 1832. So he would serve, he won an election to the U.S. Rep, and this really transitioned him from being a regional figure well known in upstate New York and some fringe areas of modern New England into being on the national stage. He wins election, he enters Congress, and this is during Jackson's presidency. So you can pretty much guess where he fell in that line. And so he not only positioned himself in the early Whig Party, but he positioned himself very clearly and directly as an anti-Jackson. He did not shy away from that. He did not try and act like he's anti-Jackson to be part of the Whigs. He was just like, hey, I believe in... I believe in like national internal improvements, banking stability, and Congress being in charge. Because you know who also believed in Congress being in charge? The founding fathers. That's right, Article 1.
Right. Saying the president doesn't have supreme power over everything?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. So as the Whig Party starts, the Whig Party is now starting to form a real party, right? It's all that cosmic dust now starting to form a planet. And he aligns the Whigs on economic modernization. There's a term that popped up in some of the pieces I was reading on him. Mm-hmm. He was a big supporter of predictable credit. And I was like, that's so far into your time in the 1830s, being like, guys, we need to have a predictable credit system because that's going to allow industry to flourish. And the dude saying that is some guy who, in his early teens, was able to use his skills to start commercial enterprises, and then became a lawyer. Like, I kind of want to listen to that guy. That guy seems pretty smart when it comes to knowing what people need.
Did he study economics too? Because it sounds like he's got a pretty good grasp.
No, we don't really have what we'd consider modern, like what we would consider economics, right? Because A Wealth of Nations
hadn't really come about yet. Right?
Yeah, it's 1776. So you start right now in the 1830s. You start having like Robert Malthus and those guys pop up, proto-microeconomics. But no, the idea of like Keynesianism, like that's a macro idea, is 1920s.
Right.
Like I don't think people realize how new macroeconomics is. Like It's very, very, very new. It's like the radio is older than macroeconomics.
I think, what was it, Robert Solow, the guy that
I
your
love
guy,
Robert Solow.
like he just recently passed away. Like you could have seen him like do a presentation like literally 2 years ago.
So while he's in Congress, he really becomes a supporter, and this should be no surprise to anybody, of legislative process and institutional restraint. So he has this very strong skepticism of the expansion of executive power. He believes that executive power will be a runaway expansion if it's allowed to occur. No. And executive power has been a runaway expansion since Jackson. That has been up until Nixon when we had the War Power Acts. Yeah. And it never really came back to what the Founding Fathers wanted it to be.
Right.